Set in the deep blue South Pacific, 1,200 miles from Australia, the North and South Islands of New Zealand. One-28th the size of United States, 3/4 the size of Japan, slightly smaller than Great Britain and Ireland. New Zealand's North Island. Crystal clear waters and a friendly climate make the Bay of Islands in Northland the closest thing to paradise. There are over 150 islands to explore, every one different and exciting. The Bay of Islands is made for lovers of water sports. You don't even have to own your own boat. You don't have to be an expert. Dinghy sailing, water skiing, game fishing, scuba diving. The important thing is to get out on the water. The sheltered coves and inlets provide perfect conditions for cruising and learning to sail. For some sailors, the vessels of yesteryear capture the real romance of the sea. The R. Tucker Thompson is a square-rigged replica complete with canvas sails and traditional running gear. It's all hands on deck or aloft, just like the old days. Once the sails and the course are set, the crew can enjoy some well-earned relaxation. If the early sailing ships made it through the islands, they found Russell a fascinating town with a somewhat checkered history. Russell was the first capital of New Zealand. The town was not always the peaceful spot it is today. In the early 19th century, there were 20 grog shops frequented by unruly whalers, convicts and deserters. If the revellers weren't in the taverns, they were probably in the local police station until they cooled off. In the mid-1800s, there were frequent clashes between the early settlers and indigenous Maori. Pompalia House is the grandest of the historical buildings in Russell. It was built in 1814 as a mission and later became New Zealand's first printing house. A different museum aboard the Tui beached on the Waitangi foreshore. The beautiful three-masted ship charts the colourful maritime history of New Zealand. Relics from old vessels that didn't quite make it to shore have been carefully salvaged and displayed. It's worth a visit just to buy a ticket for a ferry excursion. And who knows what you might find on some lonely island. The famous cream trip grew from a dairy run servicing coastal farms and far-flung islands. The high-speed cat that whisks sightseers to the outermost island in the bay to see the hole in the rock. As you sail through this impressive geological formation, you'll probably see shoals of snapper, kahawai, kingfish or trevally in the deep, clear water. Sportspeople from all over the world come here to pit their strength and skill against marlin, shark, yellowtail and tuna. And at the end of each day, when the boats return, their pennants signalling a successful catch, everyone gathers at the Russell Wharf to weigh in the trophies. The Bay of Islands has seen many famous fisherfolk, including the American writer Zane Grey. In 1920, he built his base camp at Otahe Bay on Urupukapuka. His presence is still felt in the almost as famous Zane Grey Bar in the Waitangi Tourist Hotel. New Zealand's coast is abundant with shellfish too. So great is the demand that oysters are actually cultivated. Wooden frames simulate the oyster's tidal habitat. And the end product, on the shell, is absolutely delicious. Waitangi holds great historical significance for New Zealanders because it was here that the Treaty of 1840 was signed by Maori chiefs and the white settlers, or Pakeha. The treaty transferred sovereignty of New Zealand to the British Crown and guaranteed some land and fishing rights to the Maori. This treaty has been the basis of our bicultural society ever since. In the grounds of Waitangi is a Maori meeting house with its traditional barge boards representing outstretched arms of welcome. The fine carvings and panels display the craftsmanship of many of the tribes. Painted panels, beams and rafters represent the backbone and ribs of the Maori ancestors. The ornate wooden carvings in great slabs of the native totara tree are inlaid with paua or abalone shell and flanked by tukutuku, woven with flax. The Bay of Islands was the scene of fierce disputes between Maori and European in the mid-1800s. The Russell flagstaff was chopped down many times in protest by the Maori warrior Honeheke. During these clashes, the stone store on the Kerikeri Inlet was used as an ammunition magazine. These days, it's a museum. Just across the road is Rewa's village, a life-size replica of a pre-European Maori living area, not to be confused with a fortified pa. The village, or kainga, with its thatched buildings, is simple accommodation near their gardens or place of work. At Rewa's village, there are many different types of early buildings, and out of reach of predators and children, pataka or food stores. Missionaries arrived in New Zealand in 1814. The first mission, headed by Reverend Samuel Marsden, brought the Christian faith to Northland. They were eager to convert the heathen settlers and the Maori. In Russell is New Zealand's first church. The gravestones bear witness to the area's unsettled and fiery past. Even the church was not left unscathed. Waimate North was the first inland mission settlement. It has an English country village feel about it. Perhaps it's the grand old oak trees and churches which were built by the English missionaries. There are a lot of early churches in Northland, all built by the missionaries and looking like some small corner of England. Not all of Northland's towns are famous for their churches. In the 1860s, Kawa used to have coal mines. They've since closed, but the old coal-fired train still puffs its way through the town. Believe it or not, this West Coast beach is an official roadway. It's called 90 Mile Beach, although it's nearer 60. There's many a stranded vehicle been lost to the incoming tide while the owner goes fishing. The roaring surf and white sand stretch from Ahipara to Cape Reinga, New Zealand's northern tip. A calm, sunny day disguises the turbulent currents where the two great oceans, the Pacific and the Tasman, meet. The lighthouse was built in 1941. And yes, we're a long, long way from anywhere. Legend has it that departing Maori souls leave from Spirits Bay on their long journey to paradise. Unfortunately, the early settlers were not conservation-minded. Half of Northland's huge kauri trees were felled by 1885. Their long, straight trunks were used to build houses, ship masts and spars. By 1900, only a quarter of them were left standing. The majestic Tane Mahutu grows in the Waipoua forest, one of the few pockets of native bush to escape the miller's saws. The tree is estimated to be 1,200 years old. Kemp House is New Zealand's oldest kauri dwelling. It was built in 1821 in Kerikeri for missionary James Butler, but preserved by his successor, James Kemp. One of the most impressive Kauri homes is on Kawau Island. It was built in the 1860s by Sir George Grey. With imported animals and plants, he transformed the island into a veritable Garden of Eden. Auckland is about 3.5 hours drive south from the Bay of Islands. The harbour bridge, built in 1959, is the gateway to New Zealand's largest city. 1 million people live here. That's almost a third of the country's entire population. And most of the yachts are berthed here too. Auckland rightly deserves its title, the City of Sails. There is at least one boat to every 4 households. Auckland's skyline is changing rapidly, especially along the Golden Mile, Queen Street. Downtown Auckland is built on reclaimed waterfront land. Queen Elizabeth Square marks the landing point of the early tall ships. Standing guard is a Maori warrior who gazes seaward across the Waitemata or sparkling water harbour. Although Greater Auckland is one of the most sprawling cities in the world, the central business district is having to reach skywards to accommodate its rapid growth. Expansion has seen the death of many old buildings. A few, like the ferry building, have been lovingly preserved. It now houses restaurants. Diners can watch the never-ending waterfront display by people and ships of all shapes and sizes. Auckland is built on an isthmus, bounded by 2 harbours. On the eastern side is the deep and peaceful Waitemata, with its busy port and safe beaches. The west coast, with its Manukau harbour, is more rugged. Black sandy beaches and wild surf, a delight for surfers, but less welcoming to shipping. Go diving without getting wet? Kelly Tartan, who realised his dream in building underwater world, wanted to share his love of diving with everyone. Extinct volcanoes are a striking feature of the Auckland landscape. Most of them, like Mount Victoria, are terraced by the pre-European Maori. North Head is now part of a naval base, standing sentinel at the Waitemata Harbour entrance, but it used to be a fortified pa. The Maori warriors protected themselves from enemy tribes by digging deep trenches and constructing high wooden palisades. One Tree Hill used to house 4,000 warriors. It was the site of many bloody battles in the 1700s and the early 1800s. Auckland's founding father, Sir John Logan Campbell, is buried at the summit. The obelisk expresses his love for the Maori people. Mount Eden has the most accessible crater. From here you can look across to Auckland's youngest volcano and favourite landmark, Rangitoto. Rangitoto erupted lava only 750 years ago. It has no soil, no water, but miraculously over 200 types of hardy plants. Auckland's waterfront always draws a crowd. Once every year, it's joggers who congregate on Tamaki Drive to pound the roads in the world's biggest fun run. Auckland is one of the most sprawling cities. Everyone wants a house or bungalow with its own piece of lawn or garden. We call it the quarter-acre syndrome. From pseudo-colonial to Spanish, styles are varied. In recent years, the older houses have become popular. A favourite pastime amongst young New Zealanders is do-it-yourself house renovations. Auckland is the world's largest Polynesian city. Since the 60s, large numbers of Pacific Island people have flocked to New Zealand for work. With them, they bring their own culture and customs. It's been called culture, heritage, even religion. Our national sport, rugby football. All Blacks, we call them, modern warriors and national heroes. The Waikato, meaning full-flowing river in Maori, is the longest in the country. It follows a 220-mile path to the sea. For the early Maori, it was an important trade route. Today, the river's shape and flow has been altered by 7 hydroelectric power stations. Artificial lakes have been created. The river's slowed, making conditions perfect for up-and-coming Olympic rowers. Fertile pasture land flanks the Waikato. This is prime dairy country. Friesians, the most common breed, supply most of the country's milk. Other breeds for cream and butter. The New Zealand dairy farm is highly mechanised. A rotary shed can milk 500 cows in under 2 hours. That's a lot of milk. Dairy products are one of New Zealand's biggest exports. The Waikato region is renowned for its stud farms. Our earliest champion, Phar Lap, was the forerunner of a thriving thoroughbred industry.
Racing in the New Zealand Derby. Distance bells a little slow out,
Perhaps one day he'll be another Phar Lap. At the heart of thoroughbred country is Cambridge, one of the North Island's most picturesque towns. Cambridge has some distinctive turn-of-the-century buildings, like the local primary school with its 4-gable Cowrie facade. Any nostalgic Englishman would feel quite at home. The Glowworm Cave is one of the region's biggest tourist attractions. It's called Waitomo, or cave water, and folk from all around the world seem to have heard of it. Over millions of years, water has formed a labyrinth of limestone tunnels. Dripping water has shaped stalactites and stalagmites in eerily beautiful forms. The magic subterranean world is lit by a galaxy of glowworms. Their lights designed to attract moths and flies, and tourists. Glowing health is the expectation of every Kiwi. There's plenty of sunshine and fresh air to share around at Mount Maunganui Beach. The water's clear and refreshing, and the crisp air is attractive to any flying Kiwi. Kiwi fruit, on the other hand, hide away behind shelter belts of trees and hedges. Te Puke town is known as Kiwi fruit capital of the world. The Bay of Plenty soil is rich, the climate mild and sunny. Although the fruit originated in China, New Zealand horticulturalists have developed this furry kiwi into a multi-million-dollar export. and it tastes delicious. Ohutu, a splashing, boiling hot release of geothermal power. Geysers and mud pools and an ever-present smell of sulfur certainly make you curious about what's underneath. Rotorua lies in one of the world's most active volcanic zones. The Earth's crust is thin. Boiling water hisses and belches its way to the surface. The folk at Waiotapu have aptly named their boiling effervescent lake the Champagne Pool, but it's definitely not for drinking. Steam rises everywhere, in people's backyards, in parks, and on a much larger scale along the steaming cliffs of Rotomahana. Te Wairoa, the tall waterfall, is a tranquil place for a stroll, but it wasn't always so peaceful. One June morning in 1886, the sky darkened, the birds stopped singing, and minutes later, people were running for their lives. Mount Tarawera, the great volcano, was erupting. Villagers took shelter wherever they could, but many were buried alive. Over 150 people were killed, caught under nearly 9 or 10 feet of boiling mud and debris. When the houses were excavated, history was uncovered. Te Wairoa Buried Village, as it's now called, provides a unique time capsule recording the life of those early times. The volcanic blast tore a huge chasm right across Mount Tarawera and left the area a wasteland. The lush native bush that covered the mountain was instantly reduced to ash and cinders. Despite its barrenness, this otherworldly landscape has its own sinister beauty. One way or another, volcanic activity has given Rotorua its unique charm. Tarawera Lake is where the really big rainbow trout await you. The blue and green lakes beckon the photographer. And Lake Okarika lies peacefully in front of the once angry Mount Tarawera. Sheep outnumber people in New Zealand 20 to 1. Their wool and meat make the sheep our #1 export earner. They deserve to be pampered. At the Agrodome, visitors learn all about sheep. New Zealand shearers are renowned for their speed and technique. $60 million sheep can't be wrong. It's good to lose your wool at least once a year. Just think of all those clothes and carpets. Some people prefer it straight off the sheep's back. The sheepdog is the farmer's best friend, and he treads where no man can go. In New Zealand farming on difficult and remote terrain, machines will never replace the dedicated and intelligent sheepdog. There are many breeds of sheep, and they all have different ideas of where they want to be. Keeping them in their place, that's Skip's job. New Zealand rivers teeming with rainbow and brown trout attract fishermen from around the globe. But at Rainbow Springs, they're not for catching, just for looking at. The Maori would cook his catch au naturel, steam it slowly on hot rocks in a hole in the ground, or hangi. Rotorua is New Zealand's best-known centre of Maori cultural activity. History, legend, arts and crafts are all on display in this unique thermal setting. Maori carvings recalling genealogy and legend adorn meeting houses on marae throughout the country. They have also earned a place in art galleries and museums in other parts of the world. The resurgence of Maori art has seen many young people trained by master carvers. Loving hands put life back into ancient forest timbers. War and peace. The Elizabethan-styled Tudor towers provides the perfect backdrop for a friendly game of bowls. Wairaki International Golf Course is not only picturesque, it has a few built-in challenges. Try and stay out of the rough. Wairaki thermal energy is harnessed to produce electricity. The whole valley shakes and rumbles as tremendous dry steam power is piped to the turbines. The mighty Hooker Falls. New Zealand's crystal clear rivers and streams provide the ideal habitat for trout. And where you find trout, you'll find anglers and fishing lodges. In New Zealand, you can't buy a trout in a shop. It's against the law. Keen sportsmen have seen to that. So, if you want a trout, you have to catch it yourself. The Tongariro River, like all the others in the central North Island, flows down from the mountains of Tongariro National Park, cool and clear. Hydro dams, too, provide deep holes and swirling currents, home for many a wily rainbow trout. The Tongariro Trout Hatchery sees to it that the fish remain plentiful. The first rainbow ova came to New Zealand from California in 1874. Since then, the Turangi Hatchery has exported over to many countries, including back to California. Taupo is New Zealand's largest lake, 26 miles long. At its southern end is Waihi village, a picturesque Maori hamlet, home of the Tuwharetoa tribe. St. Werenfried Church may look European on the outside, but inside there's a strong Maori influence. Next to the church is Tapeka Meeting House, built in 1959, with its proud teko teko standing above the traditional gable. Just south of Lake Taupo is Tongariro National Park, with volcanoes, snow, native bush, alpine scenery, and a grand old hotel, the Chateau, built in the 1920s. At park headquarters, rangers are always on hand to explain the features of the park. There are many scenic walkways. You can take a 20-minute stroll to a waterfall or go on a 5-day trek, staying in one of several huts. Tongariro National Park, with its 3 great mountains, Tongariro, Narahoi and Ruapehu, crosses several climatic zones, from temperate to alpine, from dense forests and ferns to hardy alpine vegetation. Skiers flock to Turoa and Whakapapa, the main ski fields on Ruapehu's 9,000-foot slopes. To the east coast, and one of North Island's sunniest towns, Gisborne. Overlooking the town is a statue of Captain Cook, who sailed into misnamed Poverty Bay aboard the Endeavour in October 1769. He and his landing party were the first Europeans to set foot on New Zealand soil and met with a mixed reception. Nick, the surgeon's boy, was the first to sight land. Today he looks out over a busy port to the headland named after him, Young Nick's Head. Gisborne is Captain Cook country. Replicas of the great white bird Endeavour seem to pop up everywhere. Gisborne residents are proud of their town's rich heritage. The earliest European house, Wiley Cottage, has been lovingly preserved. 3 hours down the coast to Napier. 1931, a violent earthquake reduced the town to rubble. 256 people were killed. During the Depression, Napier was one of the few places offering work, and the town was virtually rebuilt. Art Deco designs were in vogue at the time. Today's bustling reconstructed town has an unusual blend of that style and traditional Maori motifs. Napier's living attraction, marine land. Dolphins have won the hearts of many New Zealanders, and none more so than Opo from Opononi, the affectionate dolphin who loved to play with children. He starred in films, songs were written about him, and he became something of a legend. Te Mata Peak offers the most spectacular views of the region of Hawke's Bay. The lazy Tuki Tuki is one of 3 large rivers that wander down to the coast from the inland ranges. Te Mata Estate Winery began production in 1896, which makes it the oldest in the country. The sunny climate and low rainfall provides ideal conditions for growing grapes and producing award-winning wine. Taranaki has a wild and varied coastline with black iron sand dumped on the shore as recently as 250 years ago by the then active Mount Taranaki. The region is dominated by the mountain, also known as Mount Egmont. The rich volcanic ash allows the land to support intensive grazing. It's a healthy place to grow up in, and no matter what you do or where you go, the mountain always seems to be right there with you. Taranaki, like the Waikato, is dairy country, thanks to the climate and extensive research into the growing of our most successful crop, green grass. Most of New Zealand's regional towns are on the coast, and many at the mouth of major rivers. Wanganui on the North Island west coast is a good example. The 180-mile-long Wanganui River was once a main highway, and the city's activity is still closely linked with the river and its port. But New Zealand is not all sheep, cows and rivers. The discovery of natural gas, both on and offshore, has brought a new self-sufficiency to the country. At Motunui, the refinery converts gas to gasoline. When you arrive at Wellington by air, you land at one of the world's most interesting international airports, the wild waters of Cook Strait at one end and Wellington Harbour at the other. When you arrive by ship, you're greeted by one of the most beautiful harbours in the world, second largest city and the country's capital. If you don't live in Wellington, you call it Windy City. At the centre of it all, Parliament buildings and the government beehive, with Richard John Seddon, founder of our modern Parliament, looking on. The New Zealand ensign, with its Union Jack and 4 stars of the Southern Cross, symbolises our heritage. The stately fern symbolises our love of nature. Gardens flourish in the capital, as does our native Christmas tree, the Pohutakawa. Wellington takes pride in its short history. Buildings like the old Turnbull Library will be preserved, as will the biggest wooden building in the Southern Hemisphere, now a government department. Wooden houses too cling to the hillsides of Wellington's inner suburbs. Something of a monument in the city is the railway station. The days of steam have gone, and today's commuters travel on fast electric units. Lambton Quay is the heart of downtown Wellington and the financial district. Michael Fowler Centre is heart of Wellington's artistic life. And the cable car from the city to Kelburn is the pride and joy of every Wellingtonian. Beyond the distant hills lies a whole different New Zealand experience, the South Island. It's a short flight or a trip on a roll-on, roll-off ferry. Out across Cook Strait to the land South Islanders call the mainland, the real New Zealand. New Zealand's South Island. From the North Island, only a ferry ride across Cook Strait, named after James Cook, the first European to realise that New Zealand wasn't just one big island. To Picton, nestled deep in the Marlborough Sounds. It used to be a busy whaling and trading port. These days it serves as a stepping-off point for the thousands of tourists who visit the south each year. The hulk of an old sailing ship, the Edwin Fox, built in 1853, raised from the seabed by Picton's enthusiastic restorers. And here's another relic. It's called a tuatara. It's a survivor from the times of moas and dinosaurs, and now has sanctuary on the islands in the Sounds. Nelson, standing on the tip of the South Island, is renowned for perpetuating the name of the famous admiral, its sunny climate, and for growing the region's specialities, apples, tobacco, and hops. Nelson Cathedral marks the spot where early Christian services were held in a tent. The scenic route to the west coast follows the Buller River. In places along the Buller Gorge, the road has literally been hacked out from the cliff face. A good place to stop for a trip into nostalgia, Shantytown. Like a Western movie set, it's typical of gold mining towns that sprang up from nowhere. Men flocked here from all over the world when news of the strike leaked out. A steam train takes passengers through the bush to see the old Chinese gold workings. Panning for gold was and still is a painstaking business. It helps to have an expert on hand. Once you've learned the tricks of the trade, you're welcome to buy your own pan and head out into the bush in search of your own stream and perhaps the big strike. Mitchell's Gully, a real gold mine, still in working order. The water wheel operates the stamping battery, which crushes the rock into small pieces. Each stamper weighs 25 pounds and drops 60 times a minute. The water and mercury-covered copper plates separate sand from gold. Pop the grains into a retort, apply heat, and make your own gold ingot.
42 years since I learned French in school.
It all looks so easy, but remember, it was all pick and shovel work in the old days. During the gold rush year of 1865, the Hokitika River mouth was the landing place for boats which brought in over 15,000 people to New Zealand. 2 years later, the figure had swollen to 37,000. Today, the capital of the goldfields, Hokitika, has reverted to a small, quiet town. Little is left of the houses, hotels, and even an opera house that were here in its heyday. One thing that does remain is the statue of Richard Seddon, first mayor of Hokitika. He became New Zealand's longest-serving premier, which earned him a place outside Parliament in Wellington. Greenstone or jade was found in large quantities in the Hokitika region. A much prized possession of the Maori people, it was used for making tools, weapons, and ornaments. The love of greenstone lives on. Today's carvers have quite different visions, but perhaps also inspired by legend or nature. A greenstone tui or parson bird whose feathers were also prized by the Maori. Nature's own sculpture, the Punakaiki rocks, also known as pancake rocks, and it's easy to see why. Anyone for maple syrup? In the South Island, you can travel for miles through wild and lonely country without seeing signs of habitation. Crossing from the west to the east coast, the first town you'll encounter is Kaikoura, which used to be one of the largest whaling settlements in the South Island. The whalebone arch is one of the many relics of the whale hunting days. Kaikoura has a whole whaling museum which recalls some of the great catches, from launching the boats to extracting oil from blubber in the tripot. Today's boats have to contend with the same wild Pacific, but are looking for smaller denizens of the deep, the more succulent crayfish. The Maori name Kaikoura literally means meal of crayfish, and was once the name of the whole South Island. Crayfish tails, which bear most of the flesh, are so deliciously succulent that they command very high prices on overseas markets. In fact, they are now one of our big export earners. The fishing's good round these parts. The local cormorants seem to think so too. The Kaikoura Peninsula, which was once an island thousands of years ago, is now home to a thriving colony of seals. Somehow they managed to survive the mass slaughter by Sydney-based pelt hunters early last century. Today, seals and all marine mammals are protected by law. A comforting thought. The South Island is home to about 25% of all New Zealanders, and 300,000 of them live in Christchurch on the Canterbury Plains. The focal point for the city is Cathedral Square. The most impressive of Christchurch's neo-Gothic architecture is the Anglican Cathedral. The square attracts characters, some comic, others with a message, but all with lots to say.
Breaking in this vicious brute of a mad, raving animal!
There's none more popular and provocative than the Wizard.
Any man who writes nonsense.
He must have said something very provocative. Canterbury founding father John Robert Godley looks on. So does Robert Falcon Scott, explorer. Christchurch still hosts explorers on their way to the Antarctic. The Christchurch Town Hall is the city's most striking modern public building. Built in 1972, it has pride of place on the banks of the Avon River. The Bridge of Remembrance over the Avon was built in honour of Christchurch's World War I soldiers. The Avon meanders through the city's green belt. Often called the Garden City, Christchurch has an old world, almost medieval charm, not often seen in a city only 150 years old. The Botanic Garden's neat lawns, woodland and formal flower beds are encircled by the river. The first oak was planted in 1863, though the main attractions are the rose gardens and the conservatories, offering vivid displays of exotic plants. More English than England, that's what they say about Christchurch. It isn't only the architecture that harks back to the motherland. Traditions are upheld too. Christ's College is the closest thing in New Zealand to an English public school. Bicycles rule the road in Christchurch. The land's flat and there's a network of cycle tracks through the parks and reserves. It wasn't long ago that horses provided the main means of transport. Canterbury Museum houses vividly descriptive recreations of pioneer days. Old-timers still recall the Cobb & Co. coaches. Entering Akaroa is like moving into a time warp. French colonists put down roots here in 1840, only to find that the British had already claimed sovereignty of the South Island. There's still a strong French flavour in the town, though most of the buildings that remain are Victorian style. Akaroa was intended as a whaling base, but as it turned out, the settlers preferred the land to the sea. Sheep and wheat farms checkerboard the Canterbury Plains. Fertile soil and warm, dry winds make the region New Zealand's grain and grass seed belt. Sheep farming has a long tradition in Canterbury and the adjoining Mackenzie country. In the 1850s, shepherds and farm labourers were among the first British migrants, so wool quickly became the major export. Lush green grass turned into hay for the winter allows livestock to live outdoors all year round. Holdings are huge in this part of the country, and the steep terrain requires regular fertilising. Aerial top dressing was pioneered in New Zealand and has turned large tracts of unusable country into pastoral lands. Can Kiwis fly? In New Zealand, aviation is a way of life. It all started right here with the intrepid aviator Richard Pearce, who New Zealanders believe made the first recorded flight in history in a heavier-than-air machine. A wayside monument marks the location. Motat Museum recognises the achievement, flight before the Wright brothers. You could be the only person on the planet in parts of the South Island. The barren scrub and tussock lands are grazed. Sheep in their thousands just disappear into the hills to be rounded up on horseback or even by helicopter a couple of times a year. This awe-inspiring country has some unforgettable scenery. Lake Tekapo, with its quaint and solitary Church of the Good Shepherd, is like an oasis. A tribute to the faithful sheepdog. Without him, farming in the Mackenzie country would not have been possible. For the best views, it's up into the hills any way you can get there. The reward, panoramic vistas of ice-blue Lake Pukaki. Choose 3 horsepower or 4-wheel drive. Mount Cook is New Zealand's highest at 12,000 feet. The surrounding national park is one of the most rugged and beautiful wilderness areas. The Hermitage is typical of the quality tourist hotels situated in the remotest spots to take advantage of South Island's dramatic beauty. Mountain climbers from all over the world are lured to Mount Cook. It's not only the challenge of the summit that inspires them, it's the simple grandeur. Bushwalks, mountain streams, and unique alpine flora. You don't have to be a mountain climber to explore Mount Cook National Park. A quick photo for the record before flying deep into the interior. There are 15 peaks over 9,000 feet high, and glaciers, pinnacles of ice, bottomless chasms, and long stretches of powder snow that attract skiers from all over the world. It used to be a problem getting non-climbers to the head of the Tasman Glacier. Then an engineer called Wiggly devised the ski plane. Wheels for the landing strip, retractable skis for the snow. The Tasman Glacier is 18 miles long, the longest in New Zealand. Up here it's all beautiful and irresistible, but further down, its icy surface makes it one of the most demanding and thrilling ski slopes in the world. West of the Southern Alps is Westland National Park. Jagged, snow-capped peaks rise steeply from the coast. The heavy rainfall gives birth to 12 large rivers and a mass of waterfalls. Vegetation is dense and luxuriant. The park has twin glaciers, the Fox and the Franz Josef. The Franz Josef is 7 miles long and about 7,000 years old. It stops only 12 miles from the coast and feeds the swift and icy Waiho River. The uneven flow of the glacier and meltdown in the sun, rain and wind creates unusual icy structures, a continuously changing and challenging icescape. The glacier is pushed relentlessly by snowfields high up. It flows about 3 feet or so a day. Temperature and snowfall determines the speed. Dunedin's founders, who sailed from Scotland in 1847, have left the indelible print of their homeland on the city. Larnock's castle is as solid as any building in Scotland. The Scots settled comfortably in countryside that wasn't much different from the Scotland they'd just left. Men of the land of the thistle would never forget their native Scotland, but would equally show their allegiance to their new home. Men like William Larnock sought to create a city that would last, favouring stone to the timber used elsewhere in the country. All roads lead to the Octagon at the heart of the city. It was 1846 when Charles Kettle staked out the city's 8-sided centre. Dunedin, which incidentally means Edinburgh of the South, takes great pride in its cathedral and churches. The Presbyterian First Church is a magnificent example of Gothic architecture with its soaring spires and ornate stained glass. The pioneer architects brought the styles of Europe with them. They wanted to create a model city and even lavished attention on functional public buildings like the railway station. And the law courts with its Gothic facade, built in 1902 for only £20,000 sterling. Ulverston, built by the Theomin family, has the largest collection of antiques in the country. Parts of the interior were pre-built in England. Dunedin's early citizens must have been fairly affluent, judging by the treasures they accumulated. Ulverston houses the Cigarette Smoker, a national treasure, painted by the artist Sir William Goldie. Goldie's realistic portraits, held in museums throughout the country, opened the door on the Maori way of life barely tainted by European influence. Scottish poet Robbie Burns has pride of place in the Octagon, and more than a passing interest in Dunedin. His nephew, Thomas Burns, was an early Dunedin religious leader. Many cities, including San Francisco, claim the world's steepest street, but Dunedin's is straight and narrow. The Clutha River could equally have been lifted right out of Scotland. And Roxburgh takes its name from the ancient ruins on Scotland's Teviot River. For New Zealand, Roxburgh means hydroelectricity. When it was built in 1962, it was our largest dam, over 200 feet high with a 20-mile lake behind it. Roxburgh also means orchards, irrigated by the Clutha's snow-fed waters, apricots, peaches and delicious nectarines. Back near the coast to unusual limestone hills and the caves of Takiroa. Takiroa means long echo in Maori. The very first inhabitants of New Zealand, the moa hunters, lived here, preying on the huge flightless bird that was finally slaughtered to extinction. The hunters used the caves for shelter and left behind rock drawings in charcoal and red ochre. The giant flightless moa towered over its captors. The kiwi couldn't fly away from danger either, but he managed to survive to become New Zealand's national bird symbol. New Zealand has many indigenous birds. The native wood pigeon or kerero, swamp birds like the pukeko, coastal birds like the heron, and the red-crowned parakeet or kakariki found deep in the forests. What can you say about this bird? What an egg! Actually, it's a moraki boulder. They litter the beach along a stretch of the Otago coastline, fashioned by wind and sea. As are the cathedral caves on Waipati Beach. They're about 150 feet high in places, but you can get in here only at low tide. New Zealand's coastline hides a bounty of shellfish. The delicious toiroa, plump and succulent, is there for the passing gourmet. In season, it is. Seahorses, following in the hoof tracks of harness champions Young Quinn and Cardigan Bay, these standard-bred youngsters show their paces on Invercargill's Oreti Beach. The tourist mecca of Queenstown. The burgeoning town faces the cool southerly breeze to take advantage of the spectacular views across Lake Wakatipu. There's no shortage of hotel accommodation. Glistening Lake Wakatipu lies in a Z-shaped glacier valley. It's the second largest South Island lake. Long and narrow, it's 54 miles in length and 3 miles across at its widest point, and nearly a quarter mile deep. Wakatipu has a strange phenomenon, a pulsation of the waters attributed to the breathing of a buried mythical giant. The lady of the lake, the stately Earnslaw, once carried wool bales and timber. Now she dreams a little and reminisces with Queenstown's visitors. Today there's a new breed of water traveller, and Queenstown's Shotover River has the challenges. Too slow? Try another New Zealand invention, the jet boat. Kawarau River looks like lots of fun if you don't self-destruct. Down to earth and leave civilization behind. Pony trekking way up into the Queenstown Hills, perhaps in search of deer. And they can be found in captivity, bred for venison. Arrowtown sprang up during the gold rush. William Fox struck gold nearby in 1862. These days, the town is just as busy with the influx of tourists who can try panning for gold or wandering through some of the many craft and gift shops. Arrowtown streets are lined with quaint 19th century miners' cottages and shady sycamore trees worth capturing on canvas. Not a bad likeness. Lake Hayes, named after European explorer Bully Hayes, is also known as Waifakaata, or water that reflects things. It's a favourite spot among trout fishermen and photographers and golfers. The Crown Range Road to Lake Wanaka is the highest main road in the country and one of the few places your car is not insured. Like Queenstown, Wanaka is a summer and winter playground. In summer, there's swimming, water skiing and trekking into the high hills and all manner of boating. Wanaka is the headquarters for New Zealand's second largest national park, Mount Aspiring National Park, and the quick way to get to the action is by hovercraft. The historic Haast Pass is the linking highway to the west coast. It follows the old Maori Greenstone Trail, which was rediscovered by the gold prospector Charles Cameron in 1863. The pass was named after Julius van Haast, who followed later. The Haast Pass has the highest rainfall in the country, but because it's the lowest alpine pass, it's rarely snowbound. Until 1880, the pass was only the Packhorse Trail. In 1929, roadworks began, but it wasn't until over 30 years later that Wanaka was finally linked to the coast at Haast. Farming folk were freed from decades of isolation, and people were given access to some of the country's most striking scenery. Pick and shovel may have helped form the Haast Pass, but wind and sea alone have worked together on dramatic formations along the coastline. The three thimbles are typical of the west coast's rugged beauty, with native forest reaching right to the sea. Lake Teano in Fiordland is the longest lake in New Zealand, the largest in the South Island. The remote region is deeply forested and mountainous, and as the area's name suggests, dissected by narrow fjords. The silence broken only by the occasional floatplane. The unspoiled heartland is best explored from the air. The fjords in Fiordland National Park, New Zealand's largest park, were formed by massive glaciers during the Ice Age. Mountains soar vertically from the water's edge. Much of the area is impenetrable. The quiet inner reaches have been left untouched. Well, almost. Much of the park is in dense moss-laden beech forest, alive with the shrill cries of native birds. There are walking tracks to suit all levels of fitness. The finest walk in the world, they call it, the 35-mile Milford Track. You can do it the hard way, carrying all your own gear, or go with a guide and have food and accommodation supplied. It starts with a launch ride to the head of Lake Teano. Explorer Quintin McKinnon was the first to forge his way across the rugged mountains into Milford in 1888. Only 4 years later, he drowned in the very lake that marks the beginning of the walk, Lake Teano. The sort of landscape the track traverses is densely wooded, the lush native ferns and trees fed by the heavy rainfall. Watch out for the cheeky care, or mountain parrot, who, rather like the magpie, will steal anything. The reward for aching muscles and shoulders is the superb views along the way, and finally traversing the McKinnon Pass. Then it's the spectacular Sutherland Falls cascading from a mountain lake. Milford Sound, in its unparalleled beauty, the airstrip dwarfed by surrounding rock faces. After the rigours of the track, you may wish to indulge yourself with a night at the Milford Hotel to take advantage of all the best views of Mitre Peak. A launch trip across Milford Sound to Mitre Peak and the Bowen Falls is an unforgettable experience. Sheer cliffs rise 3,500 feet from the sea. Mitre Peak is the king at over 5,000 feet. Donald Sutherland, the first European to discover Milford Sound, was bewitched by its overwhelming beauty. He never left the place. The rest of us are left with memories of one of the loveliest places on Earth.